Hi, homeschool friends. Welcome back. We just went through the lesson on the why, and hopefully you wrote your story and you've had a chance to reread it or highlight things that you noticed in there that might be driving the how of your homeschool. If you don't have any insights yet, that's okay. We're going to walk in this lesson through the different homeschooling approaches that families have used over the years. We're going to talk about what's great about each one and what's maybe not so great about each one. Keep in mind that your family and your children are unique. You will not end up with a cookie cutter homeschool. You will not end up with a homeschool that looks like an institutional school, no matter what you do, because you are unique, your kids are unique, and your why is different than everybody else's. So let me share my screen. Keep in mind that your why lays the foundation of how you will run your homeschool. So as we go through these approaches, keep in mind some of them are going to appeal to you. Always ask yourself, if it appeals to me, does it also appeal to my kids? If you've got a good match that way, then you're on the right track. If something appeals to you, but you know it won't be appealing to your kids, or if you've got something that you just really don't like, but it's just right for your kids, then you might be on the right track and we need to do some adapting or adjusting to make it work. Okay, so let's talk about the common homeschool approaches. Each of these has good things about them, and each has some things that you might go, oh, that's just not me, and that's okay. Let's start with school at home. School at home usually is a traditional textbook, or a lot of new homeschoolers want something that's easy to order. They get it, they open the box, and they can just go with it. We call that boxed curriculum, obviously. And a lot of times boxed curriculum is set up in little work text packets that have 10 packets for a school year, 9 or 10 packets for a school year. Each one is meant to cover about a month. And obviously you're not going to get one packet for a whole month. You get a packet for each subject that you pick that curriculum in. A lot of kids really like traditional textbooks because they're set up in an orderly way, and they give them that sense of official work. I'm doing school. Some kids really love the packets. They know that each month that packet's going to last a month and then they're done. And there's a sense of accomplishment, and then we're moving on. I'm not a traditional textbook or packet kind of teacher, but I certainly see the benefit in it for some kids. In fact, I have a daughter who loved workbooks and loved doing worksheets. Not my style of teaching, but she loved it. And so as we went through our homeschool, I just adapted for her, and I got her the workbooks she needed to thrive and feel like she was accomplishing her work. All right, the classical trivium is based on a child development in 3 stages. It depends on what child development researcher you're looking at, but the classical trivium works on 3 different stages. So if you get a classical trivium curriculum, they usually will be multi-aged, and they will gear for a younger child, a middle child, and an older high school child. That's really nice if you have multiple kids in your family and you want to be on the same page and study the same thing, but you need to be able to adapt down and up as you progress through the curriculum. The classical trivium also typically does the literature from classics. You won't see trendy, right off the press kind of trade books or library books. So if you like those, you'll just have to add them in. But just know that the classical trivium is mainly focused on those developmental stages. By the way, there's both faith-based and there's secular curriculum out for a classical trivium approach. I will let you know that a lot of kids who are struggling to learn to read have a hard time with the classical approach because it involves typically a lot of reading. Unit studies or project-based tends to be more hands-on. What you would get in the classical trivium and where it's lacking is balanced by the unit studies or the project-based approach, meaning classical trivium is heavy in content, unit studies are heavy in hands-on. Somewhere you might want to merge the two, and that's where we get into some of the later approaches that we're talking about. All right, a relaxed homeschool approach typically means you're going to follow a routine. It's still structured, but it's not rigidly scheduled. It doesn't involve necessarily sitting down and doing a lot of paperwork. It may involve a lot of reading, but it's kind of floating through the day and learning as it happens. It still can be very structured in your routine with plenty of time to do the reflective thinking that a lot of our kids with special needs need. They really need more processing time, and a Charlotte Mason approach certainly can do that. If you are thinking about a relaxed homeschool approach, I would highly suggest reading a Charlotte Mason companion guide. It's a nice, concise, it's still a little thick, but it's a nice way to get introduced to the philosophy of Charlotte Mason. You don't even need to use materials that are promoted as Charlotte Mason materials because it's more of a philosophy or an approach. Experiential is similar to project-based or unit studies, except that it also embeds skills. Skills, I separate. Skills are reading, writing, math, any kind of process that you're doing versus content knowledge like history or science. Experiential is typically used at the preschool or early primary grade levels. And you will often find people kind of settling in one camp or another, either Montessori, which is very, very well known. Reggio Emilia is a pretty cool approach if you ever read about it. And Waldorf. Most of the experiential approaches are a slower starting pace, meaning spend more time developing those fine motor skills, the early childhood thinking skills, before you introduce abstract concepts like letter sounds and reading. Reading is actually very abstract. So if you're interested more in an experiential approach, or if you've done traditional American preschool that's already teaching letter sounds and math symbols and reading and adding, and it's not working, it could be your child needs more developmental time, and looking at an experiential approach might be a good idea in the meantime while you study what you want to do going forward. The Moore formula we don't hear much about anymore. However, it's still around. Back in the 80s and 90s, the Moore family developed an approach that was driven by training character in children. Many of the character training programs are Christian-based, but there's secular ones out there too. The Moore formula means typically, at least in my mind, that it's integrated. My main focus is building character in my children. I want them to know right and wrong. I want them to have positive character traits. And in that, I embed that in everything we do. It's similar, I guess, to a Christian worldview, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's just that everything's done from that mindset of I'm building character. And so one of the examples is there's a program by the Biblical Institute, and it has character traits tied to animals. And then you also do history and social studies and cooking and art and all kinds of activities while you're reading and writing about character traits that we live by. All right, unschooling is a very popular term right now, but I think most people have kind of a different idea. So many different ideas on what unschooling is. One of the buzzwords you're going to hear is child driven or interest driven. That's great, but I'm going to tell you that unschooling, if you truly do it right, takes a lot more work than most of these other approaches. Mostly, I think that people assume that if they just live life and their kids are around them, they're going to be learning from their model, which is very true. However, if you're just doing that, make sure that you embed something in there for kids to learn to read and write and do math. Because if there's one thing I know about kids with special needs, or even a unique learner who is undiagnosed with any kind of special need, they typically don't learn things implicitly. They will pick up on your habits, they will pick up on your ways of doing things, but they don't necessarily pick up on the more abstract academic skills. And so I just want to encourage you, certainly you could do an unschooling approach, but if you're going to, and you have a kid with dyslexia or autism or any other kind of special need, like my son has memory issues, it may not be the most ideal approach because you need to ensure that they are actually learning how to function in life. All right, an eclectic approach is a mix of several different approaches. I'm going to tell you that that's what I consider our homeschool. We do a little bit of textbooks. Mostly I use them as spines. We do a lot of classical literature. I break down our child development stages a little bit more than just a trivium, but we like classics. I do a lot of unit studies, either by the week or the month, depending on my kid and what age they are and where they are developmentally. For sure, we're relaxed. We do not follow a very tight, rigid schedule that's time bound. I like experiential. I like Montessori and Reggio Emilia. I like the philosophies of freedom of movement and freedom to explore. So I use a lot of those. We definitely do character training, and we do some child driven, mostly through play. I would say if there's anything I'm not, it's an unschooler, but probably because I'm so eclectic in picking the approach and the materials that my kids need at the time that they need them. Technology-based is a little different than virtual courses or online resources, and I want to delineate between those. Technology-based is not usually an online school. It may be a supplemental program like ABC Mouse or Khan Academy. It could even be just a game. I like toy theater. It has a lot of just little snippets of games that you can use. It gets my kids on the computer, learning how to use a mouse, learning how to use a keyboard, learning how to respond. I have touch computers, so if they can't do a mouse, they can touch. Technology-based is great. And sometimes the core curriculum through technology is great. But honestly, I've never found a complete program in hard copy book textbooks or in technology that I love the whole program. I guess that's why I'm eclectic. Virtual courses is usually an a la carte video lesson based thing. There are like open course, or there's other programs where you can just get a course and your kid can do that for 4 to 6 weeks, and they can take a course. Sometimes it's teacher led, sometimes it's remote, and all they're doing is walking through the course online. But it's different than a technology based gaming kind of thing where they're actually being taught content. Online resources is more for you. You certainly can find all kinds of printable worksheets, teacher plans, teacher resources for free. Sometimes there's a little fee to them. Be careful if you go this route. It's really easy if you drop a couple bucks here, $4 here, $10 here for a resource. It's really easy to spend a lot of money. If you look for free things, there's lots of stuff out there. But be careful, because then you also get more into a more expensive version, believe it or not, of a traditional textbook approach. You're just plugging in worksheets that you've downloaded and printed. By the way, the expense is not in the product purchase, it's in the printing. So if you decide to go with your own resources, watch your costs. And are you really replacing a textbook approach that could be more comprehensive and cover all of the skills that you want to cover? I separate special needs from eclectic. Even though I think they go hand in hand, they are not necessarily enmeshed. You can definitely do an eclectic approach for neurotypical kids. Special needs kids often require explicit instruction from learning objectives because they easily get gaps in their learning, and they don't pick things up implicitly, meaning they just get it from doing life. Explicit instruction means that you point out the things that other kids might typically just pick up. For instance, if you've got a kid with a language-based disability like dyslexia or autism, they probably don't understand idioms in language. Many English language learners from a different country don't understand English idioms. Explaining that you hit the nail on the head has nothing to do with a hammer and nail, but they got the right answer. That's explaining something explicitly. And many of the materials designed for kids with special needs embed that explicit instruction into the student materials, but especially into the teacher materials. And as we go and we really start talking about curriculum, I'll give you some resources for places to find that kind of curriculum, or how to set up your learning objectives so that you can look for the a la carte kind of materials that you want to use in your homeschool. All right, there's probably many, many other approaches, but I just want to encourage you that the homeschool approach that you pick drives your curriculum choices, because everything's written by somebody, a person, a teacher, or a homeschool mom, could be a researcher. But as you pick your curriculum, you want that to match the approach that you're planning to take. I might use a textbook in my project-based unit studies. However, I'm going to use it differently than I would if my kid were going to sit down and read a section and answer questions. read a section, answer questions, and take a test. I'm going to use it as what I call a spine, meaning it's our reference, it's our resource for information, but we're doing the learning part in a different way. So an eclectic approach is similar, but not exactly like a special needs approach. However, your child's needs need to supersede anything else. So your why feeds your homeschool approach, feeds your curriculum choices. If you need help at finding out what exactly approach might fit you, you're welcome to shoot me an email with your story attached. I'll take a quick read at your story, and usually I can pick out, oh, okay, this is the homeschool approach this family probably will likely want to use. And here's the materials that likely fit that approach. Honestly, most of the time, the approaches that I suggest are eclectic, but they tend to be a merger or a mesh of several different kinds of approaches that we just talked about here. All right, well, I think we are done with the how and the why part. We'll move on to the actual learner profile. That scares a lot of new homeschoolers. So please think about your story, look at the different homeschool approaches, look at them up online, do your homework. You can pick one if you know for sure that's what it's going to be. But our next part is looking at the learner profile, and that's going to give us more insight in what choices we might want to make for ordering curriculum. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I'm sorry it's been a little bit longer than some of the other lessons, but I think it's important to understand the difference of what you're looking at in how homeschoolers do their learning in the home environment. By the way, one of my pet peeves is, what's the best curriculum? Or my friend who homeschools told me this is the best curriculum. I'm sorry, but if you're working with a kid who is a unique learner, there is no such thing as a best curriculum. They're all good. They're all lacking. So pick the one that's the best fit for your family, and what your neighbor who homeschools says is the best might be the best for their family, and it may not be at all for your family. So I encourage you, do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of homework, scour around online for an approach that sounded appealing to you. Look at it. Do you have clues in my story that might go with that? Your gut sense is usually right. Moms just have this sense. So anyway, do a little thinking. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.